this thing on? Because it's getting ready to be on.
Hello and welcome to Bell Ringer. My name is Greg. Your guest name today is Dan Miner, a reporter at Buffalo Business First and someone who's been covering the tech and entrepreneurial ecosystem's complete revitalization over the last 9 or 10 years. Dan does great work and just launched Buffalo Inno along with the Beat newsletter, which you should certainly sign up for to get all your Buffalo economy information. Thanks so much to him for his work and his time joining us on the podcast, and thanks to you for listening. It's a good one.
Buffalo native, went to N-Trip and then Geneseo and embarked on my journalism career, which led me to a couple of local daily newspapers in the region, including the Tonawanda News, which I must say, rest in peace, and the Niagara Gazette. My wife and I moved to Utica in 2008 and then did a very typical sort of boomerang sort of psychological thing where we were looking to start a family and really wanted to get back to our hometown and near our own family members with the idea, which proved true, that grandparents save lives. So I pestered then Business First editor Jeff Wright incessantly until he finally gave in and gave me a job. And that was in about 2012. So I've been at Business First ever since.
So what got you interested in journalism in the first place and kind of brought you down that path, which then, leads to a job in Tonawanda, Utica, and now Business First?
Yeah. I wasn't a great college student or even a very intentional one. I mean, I liked reading and writing. And that led me into being an English major, which is a pathway to a whole bunch of things I didn't end up wanting to do, like being a teacher mostly, or a lawyer. I was fully done with school in 2005 and remain fully done with school. I feel like for the rest of my days. So what do? You kind of graduate and look around, and journalism seemed, sort of experiential and fun, and not academic or theoretical. It felt like it was something that could sort of play into my strengths and my interests. So it took a while and took some internships, unpaid internships. One unpaid internship in California, another in Manhattan. And what I sort of learned along the way was that the reading and the writing is kind of what you do at the end of it, and it's important to be able to express yourself and communicate. But the daily process of collecting people's stories, learning what they're about, of challenging yourself, of finding yourself in situations that are kind of awkward, or where you're trying to extract some bit of data or information that others don't want to tell you, is a valuable way to sort of live your life. And so I kind of fell in love with it, the side of it that I never really anticipated, and it stuck with it. And it's been the industry is sort of in some ways sort of crumbled around me from 2005 to 2021. I think anybody who survived during that time really had to be sort of dedicated to the craft. And I always have been. There haven't been a whole lot of other things, even as my life has changed, that I've considered besides journalism. I think it's sort of maybe inherently kind of what I am.
Well, so you moved back here in 2012 with Business First, and you've covered, a whole bunch of things, and Business First as a publication, obviously innately covers kind of all of our economy, and you've kind of done the same in your reporting. One of your kind of larger beats that you cover, and I think that you more focus in now, and what I think we'll most talk about, is that tech and entrepreneurial ecosystem. So it sounds like you kind of found yourself into journalism post-graduation, specifically within that beat. Like, what was your, obviously the ecosystem has changed a lot since 2012, but how about yourself, like your education and kind of on the ground learning within tech and entrepreneurialism? Did you kind of grow with the ecosystem, and kind of what was your education on the fly, I suppose, within that?
All right, let me answer that by taking you back just a step. So I mentioned that I worked at daily newspapers. I worked basically municipal beats at the Tonawanda News, at the Niagara Gazette, and then ultimately I was a city hall reporter in the sort of bare knuckle political environment of Utica. Um, so a lot of that coverage leads to sort of urban affairs and a lot of sort of um, traditional writing about the trajectory of those communities. And I think what that led to, that leads almost everybody to in this region and within those jobs, is sort of covering the nodes of Rust Belt decline. I'm not going to say that it's depressing, but in some ways it just sort of becomes rote and kind of mechanical. Not that covering the direction of a community and being realistic about it isn't important work, but it felt like I was sort of telling a story that it was sort of at its end stages. That these communities, what was happening to these communities had already sort of the formative dynamics had already kind of been created. So when I moved back to Buffalo, I was looking for a way to describe the place I lived in and wrote about, but and to be realistic about it, but to do it in new ways. And what led me into technology and entrepreneurship was in focusing on a generation of young professionals and really trying to describe their ambitions and their the sort of way that they define themselves as professionals. So I really just started kind of one by one, without calling it a beat yet. Nobody covered tech entrepreneurship full time in Buffalo in 2012, focusing on young people who were starting interesting projects, and really just like being the summarizer of these people who were kind of defining work in different ways, but didn't have an outlet yet. And I think that's kind of where I found my early audience, and I think where people were interested in my stories was the novelty of it. Oh, I didn't realize this was happening in Buffalo. And business first. The idea is that you're collecting information, that you're doing proprietary research, and the outcome of that are stories that are business intelligence. So I'm trying to describe what's happening on behalf of the people who are doing business here, who can take my stories into sales meetings or use them as business prospects or use them at a networking event to make themselves sound smart. And being able to describe what young people are doing and how the world is changing is I think a powerful tool. And so that's where a lot of that came from.
Yeah, we'll talk about, in a bit, the changes that the ecosystem has seen. But, while we're on the topic, you talk about covering, kind of Rust Belt decline. And that's a popular narrative, especially at that time. Now it's somewhat the reverse. And obviously you're responsible for that here in Buffalo. Do you ever, it's a balance because you're a journalist. And like you said, you're telling a realistic story. You're not a marketer for the region like myself, but do you feel, do you ever, not a responsibility, but look back on like the role that you've played in improving the ecosystem? Because, part of building an ecosystem is telling the story of that. And, you're kind of only as good as the story you're able to tell and what's kind of written about you. Do you kind of ever think about your role in the transformation?
I don't think about it too hard. I mean, I think there have been times when my coverage has made a difference, and that gives me great satisfaction. But these things are fluid and subjective. Who has an impact on what? And so like if there's a legacy for my coverage in helping sort of people realize that there's a community here and drawing attention to it, then there's some pride there. But I think that, like, if I'm being pretty honest, the world was changing this way. The generational business paradigms were changing in very substantive ways in the tens. Coming out of the recession, which really was like the formative event for a lot of young professional, millennials. And people who would watch the Facebook movie and who'd been on social media, and like this new thing was happening, and so like I couldn't take a whole lot of responsibility for that, other than sort of helping people understand it and maybe define it over the years.
Let's talk about that change then. Your time with Business First and back in Buffalo kind of, it almost perfectly mirrors that kind of growth trajectory that we've had. So from your vantage point as a storyteller and as someone that kind of was one of the first to start telling those stories of young people doing interesting things or different things that people didn't think were happening here in Buffalo, from your vantage point, what's most changed, or what's the biggest difference to you in covering Buffalo from 2012 to 2021? And you cannot answer, you can't use pandemic as an answer.
Okay, happy not to. We've done plenty of talking about COVID over the past 18 months or so. So listen, there's been a lot of change, and you can kind of tackle that question, but through different kind of perspectives, depending on what you're focusing on. If you're going to just take the absolute top level, then there's just a lot more volume. There's a lot more young people doing a lot more growth stage technology companies or tech adjacent companies. And in some ways, this is a volume based game that, not a lot of companies don't make it to their final ambitions. If so, 10% of 100 companies is a lot more success than 10% of 10 companies, so to speak. And so, so there's definitely more entrepreneurs here. There's more capital to spend on them, and there's more institutional support from the creation of government-backed initiatives that have been very effective, in my opinion, at least, like 43 North, to the attention of the philanthropic and private sectors in Buffalo, who traditionally, were kind of, in their own backyard, kind of instead of community building like maybe they are now. So I don't know, that's not that well fleshed out, that last point, but certainly the foundations and private sector companies have taken notice of the startup community and invested both the people involved and those as companies. So along the way, what's happened is that there's been sort of a natural momentum, just as there has been in cities across the country, where young people are interested in entrepreneurship and taking advantage of the opportunities that the economy affords them these days, nationally speaking. In Buffalo, there's been what I would say is a coming together, a sort of a communal vibe about it, where a lot of not everybody is swimming in the same direction, but a lot of the business community has kind of come together first kind of as a hobby, and more recently kind of more seriously, because there's a lot of money to be made here. And that's kind of presented outside of Buffalo's borders a narrative or a story that other cities of Buffalo's sizes haven't told as cohesively. And a story is a powerful thing. A regional story is a powerful thing when it comes to startup technology. It's what helps bring corporations in, and it's what helps recruit individuals to the companies here. And so I think, Buffalo, incrementally, through a lot of hard work, through some failures and missed opportunities, has kind of learned what its position is in terms of in the national startup economy. It has been really sort of efficient at describing it. And so I think those various things have all sort of come together and contributed to this sense of momentum, which I definitely feel despite the thing that's happening that we're not talking about right now.
What is, those are a lot of, a ton of positive things that have happened within the city. And, you mentioned 43 North, there's obviously like ACB auctions being a massive success. That's an obvious, like, big story that kind of changed the momentum, or at least, really expedited it. To you, like, is there one or a handful of stories that you have covered, or you think that don't get enough attention or haven't along the way for like having a bigger impact than it's maybe given weight to kind of in this transformation?
So I think that one of the things that is kind of happening that isn't part of the popular narrative yet, like 43 North has gotten a lot of attention, and I think people by now sort of understand that ACV auctions and some other companies, maybe like even Circuit Clinical, have maybe sort of captured the popular imagination around here. But the the companies that aren't homegrown, but have come to Buffalo, Odoo, Kiklo, some of the 43 North companies that are sort of here, but in other regions, such as Square or High Operator, the 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 context for what those companies see in Buffalo and Buffalo's continued like the continued need for Buffalo to show a value proposition to these companies, which how much we capture of their growth is directly related to what we can sort of offer them. I feel like isn't told as cohesively. So, I'm kind of rambling here, but what I'm trying to say is that this is a city that offers affordability and access, but doesn't have the like same talent pedigree or volume that some of the bigger places have, or the maybe the like the sexiness or the amount of funding. So can so I would say that like these stories that have sort of been maybe not in the kind of like the A list of tech startup companies. I've told them all individually. It might be more helpful to break them down individually about sort of what Buffalo offers them and what it still needs to prove to them. These are interesting early anecdotes to me because that's all they are. Like I tell this story about Buffalo going from a seedling to going to a legit startup economy now, and people go, "Oh, that's an optimistic story." And sometimes I forget to add that there's a really long way to go. This is still just a fledgling movement in terms of numbers, and I mean, when I'm writing about $1 million or to $10 million round every week, that's when we'll know that the flywheel is turning, and that's not happening yet. There needs to be more people moving in here, and there needs to be more companies starting here, and we need to look at the companies that are sort of like the early anecdotes of that, and try and figure out, what they see in us and what we risk in not fulfilling those ideals that they saw in us when they chose us.
Right. Well, and you mentioned Odoo, which is a perfect example, and Nick's been on this podcast, and I think that there's obviously people that have put in a lot of work to growing the ecosystem, but when someone from without of it, and he's from Buffalo, but from without of it chooses Buffalo, I think that kind of stands as a validation of the business case and a lot of the things that you've mentioned and that folks have worked hard to build toward. And like you're saying, they'll kind of be the stewards or examples for more to come behind them, and opening doors for others to kind of continue to choose Buffalo or at least consider it.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating case, and it's a story that's still being told. Odoo, this Nick got a personal meeting with Renee Jones when he was selling Odoo to his to his bosses. So for people who aren't familiar, Odoo is a global business management software firm that chose Buffalo early in 2020 for its East Coast headquarters. It's got or East Coast hub. It's headquartered in Belgium. So it's got two hubs in the United States. One is in San Francisco. One is in Buffalo. And they've got like at least 70 employees now in their new office in Seneca One Tower. And there was as Nick, a Western New York native who leads the local operation, was considering where to put that East Coast hub. That he received this sort of full court press in selling Buffalo, selling Buffalo it can offer Odoo. Cost of living, accessibility. Like I said, this guy who hadn't hired a single person yet was getting access to all kinds of high level business leaders and talent. And so they set up shop here, and they got, they became part of the Start New York program, and now they have a sparkling, beautiful office in Seneca One Tower. But the story is not finished yet, and the question now becomes Odoo, which competes on a global scale and is just a big name in business management software, will probably hire as many talented technology and business people in Buffalo as it can find. The question is, how many people can Odoo, find? And that's a big question. I mean, the technology workforce is tight everywhere, but there are some concerning sort of demographic pieces of demographic information in terms of how many people are going to be available here for all the opportunities are going forward. And it's kind of like people get bored talking about workforce because it's like a conversation that has never stopped going back decades and probably even centuries. But it's a fresh and important point here when it comes to the technology economy. I feel like anybody who's a good candidate, anybody who's interested in technology and has some skills could get a job here now, and definitely will be able to grow going forward. In some ways, it's less about creating the opportunities as it is about creating the candidates, and that drives a lot of decisions for companies that well, I mean, you guys know as somebody who invests Buffalo Niagara, who helps companies cite their businesses and places. The availability of talent is a big issue, and so circling back to Odoo, if Nick wants to hire 500 people, how fast can he find them? Because in hotter tech ecosystems around the country, companies are moving in with $50 million Series B rounds, looking to hire a couple hundred people like that. This is our own little test case, and I'm really interested to see how it goes.
And you're talking perfectly too about kind of the thesis or reason behind our Be in Buffalo campaign as well, attracting more talent to the region, that young tech talent, finance talent, engineering talent, Odoo, perfect example, but beyond that, is kind of a way to kind of further and true economic success. And, the census a few weeks ago, Buffalo and Erie County both growing for the first time in decades, is a really important step. And I think there's a lot of, work to be done. And a lot of the stories that you tell are some of the messages that folks around the country need to know, that there is that new Buffalo, and that, maybe if they grew up here and left, they thought there wasn't an opportunity for them. I think we both agree there are those opportunities for them now. And it's getting that message out and getting folks to either move home or consider Buffalo that have never been here as well.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, like I sort of circling back to why I covered this in the first place, like this is a new story. The fact that Buffalo is growing compared to the Buffalo that we knew when we were growing up, is just like so contradictory to the way that people thought about this region for so long. But like it's very modest growth compared to lots of regions that grew a lot further. So, Buffalo is doing great relative to its own moribund history, and it's just a platform to start creating new opportunities. And if we don't, the people who are involved in this ecosystem don't take this ball and run with it even further, and have this sort of the psychology that like you just ran the first mile of a marathon, then like this is no time for backpatting. This is a time to execute on all of the infrastructure that's been put in place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel that momentum. And you and I agreed not to talk about the pandemic, but I think that obviously stilts some things. But I think folks feel, with each new announcement and each new Dan Miner story that comes out, I think people feel energized to, not spike the ball before the end zone, but to keep pushing that momentum, keep telling our story as well of the successes that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely the conversation has changed, and those conversations are an outcome of the you know of the story that Buffalo has been able to tell about itself, but also the legitimate successes. This isn't like a false narrative, or like taking one anecdote out of context and calling it a success when it's really not. I mean, like you can you're part of something here. If you're in Buffalo, you're part of something that is sort of budding,
Right.
and that's an interesting time. I mean, it's the most interesting time, right? Because it once once you hit that, from here to where the flywheel is really spinning, and all of a sudden you're recognized as this kind of you know um, surging entrepreneurial hotspot. Like, this is where the opportunity really lies. This is where people can come in and make one person can make a big impact. One company can make a big impact in Buffalo. We're still just talking about these the Odoos of the world, things that we can count on one hand or two hands. I mean, there's my view is that despite plenty of business challenges in New York State and even in Buffalo, there's a lot of opportunity here, and I'm going about my day trying to find the people who see that same thing and trying to explain what opportunity they see and telling other people about it.
And that leads perfectly. One of the vehicles that you're now using to tell that story is Buffalo Inno. I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about, I know you launched maybe a few months ago now, but to our audience, tell us a bit about Buffalo Inno and your work there.
Yeah, thanks. So Buffalo Inno probably best be described as Buffalo Business First's a brand of journalism that sort of focuses our startup content. So it does have its own landing page or homepage that you can check if you're the sort that sort of surfs web pages like that. But the primary way that we hope that people digest this content is through a weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for on the Buffalo Inno page. I don't know if you have like a notes section. Maybe we can include that.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a lot of the stuff that I've already done, or always have been doing for the past couple of years. Funding announcements, feature stories of important people. But it does. There is a bit of a change in direction in that we're looking under every hood for every change maker that we can find, and really trying to describe who they are, where they came from, and what they're doing, with an eye on explaining the opportunity that they see, and hopefully the stories themselves are opportunities for our readers. The cool thing is that for now, Inno is free. It's not paywalled, so people can check out all these stories without subscribing to Business First. Although you should do that too. Yeah, so sign up for The Beat, our weekly email. I promise it's not another, it's full of original research by me for people doing business in Buffalo. It's not a useless newsletter that will just go to your spam and that you'll never read. And we hope that people get a lot of value out of it.
And I've thoroughly enjoyed the launch. And you kind of get to, I don't know, have a little bit of fun with your voice, at least within the Beat newsletter, which I've enjoyed personally, reading some of your anecdotes, and even, I forget what you title it, but kind of the random thought of the week in there. So have you had, just enjoyed personally kind of the launch of that newsletter and trying to build a brand kind of, behind your voice?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I mean, if you go to Maine and you see something called a fishing spider, you want nothing more than to tell other people about it. So if my Buffalo Inno newsletter has given me an outlet for short personal anecdotes, then that's something I've enjoyed as well.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. Before I let you go, we always end on a couple hard-hitting journalistic blizzard round questions. So you'll be perfect at this. So first, if you were a flavor of ice cream, what would you be?
I'd be Loganberry, but you can't get Lake Effect Loganberry at Wegmans anymore. So we need this pandemic that shall not be named to end, so that our favorite things are available at stores. Did you see that? Lake Effect is not making their ice cream only for their scoop shops anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so you're not going to be able to get it at supermarkets because of all the supply chain issues.
Hmm.
And in our house, we destroy Lake Effect Loganberry ice cream. It's the best. So,
I love their, I think it's Red Velvet, Paula's
oh yeah,
collaboration ice
that's
cream.
good
That's
stuff.
incredible. What's a book or TV show that you'd recommend?
Oh geez, okay. A book or TV show that I would recommend. Um, uh, my wife. I'm here in everybody in my global headquarters / bedroom, and my wife is my coworker who works at Lums and McCormick is laughing at me hemming and hawing over here in the corner, distracting me even further. Okay. What did we just get? Well, we just finished watching Mayor of Easttown. So that was a solid entertainment on HBO. And if you're looking to fill up a rainy autumn evening, I would suggest that.
I thought you were like looking off screen at a bookshelf or something to see what you most recently read.
I'm going to hang up and I'm going to remember 10 books and 10 TV shows. But you got me on the spot here and I blanked.
How about which do you prefer, Bills or Sabres?
I was a hockey player, a member of the Wheatfield Blades Junior B alumni. They're probably defunct now, but yeah. So for Sabres all the way.
How about text or phone call?
Phone call. Because I was a journalist. I'm old enough to be a journalist in the days when we had phone books, and I loved watching the veterans flip through with their fingers and just like find people's home numbers. So yeah, I'm that guy. I don't mind picking up the phone and getting the feel of the thing.
How about hiking or skiing?
Oh, hiking. Yeah, I was a hockey player. I didn't have time to ski.
And last question, most important, chicken wings, drumstick or flat?
Drumstick.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time and all your work for Buffalo and the region as a whole, the ecosystem. We obviously appreciate your work and you joining us here for the podcast.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me, and nice to talk to you.
Bellringer is a podcast by Invest Buffalo Niagara, the region's privately funded, nonprofit marketing and economic development organization. Please rate this podcast, follow our social media channels, and read our blog at buffaloniagara.org for the best of Buffalo Niagara. Come grow your business with us.